Well, it has been 13 years and still no answers for a wife and her 2 kids. What started out to be a fun family night of watching a movie and having some pizza quickly turned to tragedy. Here's the story of the murder of Charles Britt.
She said, I'm going to lose him before they get here, because he was being so bad. She would tore up so bad, she would try and talk to him, telling him, hang on, we can be all right.
My name is Brad Love. I retired from the Wichita Falls Police Department in 2018. While with the WFPD, I was assigned to the Crimes Against Persons Unit for about 10 years. And the Charles Britt murder was actually the first homicide that I worked when I was assigned to that unit in 2008. He was known for being an extremely hard worker and extremely dedicated husband and father. He was just a good all-around individual from everything that I was, able to uncover during the investigation.
He had gone out to get some pizza, some takeout pizza for his family. His wife, Christina, was at home with her child, and as he got home, Christina heard some noises outside, so she thought it was just him coming home.
Told the boys to get the door for their dad, and right after I told him that, I heard him say, call the police, and I heard some shuffling, and I told the boys to go to my room, and I tried to find my phone, and I couldn't find my phone, and then shortly thereafter I heard a gunshot. I opened the door, saw Charles standing in the yard, but stumbling, and saw a man running away.
He was taken to the hospital. He was discovered to be the victim of a gunshot wound. He had died from that injury. I don't believe that there was any leads or investigation that uncovered a direct connection between him and any particular suspect. I think at the initial investigation, what seemed most likely was there had been a series of aggravated robberies, and in fact in that very neighborhood during that time frame that this occurred. And all the other robbery victims were compliant. They turned over as a strong arm robbery, subject with a gun, and they turned over what the robber demanded. In this case, it appears very much like Mr. Britt may have resisted that and fought back, and during that struggle he was shot and died from that injury. It was very similar to the black male in dark clothing, and those robberies were investigated because the investigators at the time saw the causal link between this case and the other open robbery cases, aggravated robberies. What they kind of uncovered investigating those robberies is it wasn't just a single person. It wasn't one guy that was going out on different nights of the week and committing these crimes, but it were some multiple people that were kind of loosely affiliated with one another. And so then it became difficult to determine which one, if any, of these robbery suspects that they were identifying could be responsible or connected to the homicide.
Specific items were demanded and specific, in all of those robberies they had commonalities. That's, common. It appeared to me that it was probably the same person or persons committing those robberies. And then there are specific elements related to the Britt homicide which match up perfectly with those same, the same MO is, I guess, the term that we use, same modus operandi. So that was my belief then, and it really still is now, that there's some connection between the murder of Mr. Britt and those robberies in the neighborhood. They were all kind of in the same general area of town, from about, I guess, the Seymour Highway area, going north, as far north to Otto's Grocery on Harrison, that area.
Do you remember how many there were up to the point of Britt's murder?
7 that I was able to identify that were consistent with one another, in the same MO and the same suspect description, same general area, or connectivity to other cases. So it's about 7, and I don't recall any of them like that happening after after the homicides.
The hardest thing I've ever had to deal with.
Josh, Blake, and Isaac grew up on the same street as Charles Britt.
My name is Katie Crosby Holland, and I'm a former KFDX reporter, and I covered the Charles Britt murder case starting in 2008.
Charles's friends say they're coping with their own grief while remaining strong for Charles's wife and 2 sons.
I was a pretty new reporter at the time, and I had been at KFDX less than a year. And it was shocking. You know, this is not the sort of thing that I expected to happen in Wichita Falls. It seemed like such a safe town, and to have somebody violently gunned down at their home was horrifying. And, you know, it's not supposed to happen like that. It's not supposed to happen here. And when it does, there's at least supposed to be swift justice. And so I fully expected that within the next few months, we would be starting to cover a murder trial.
Any homicide that involves a stranger, someone that the victim doesn't know. The vast majority of homicides are committed by someone that the victim knows. It's going to be either an immediate family member or a close friend. And so investigators will investigate what we call concentric circles. In other words, the victim being the common center, and then you just work your way out in a circular fashion from that. Who's closest and had greatest access to the victim. The farther out in that ring you get, you start moving into these categories of strangers that the victim didn't know or his friends didn't know, and that it becomes very difficult to connect the evidence from the crime to the suspect. And so with a cold case like this, it's very likely that it was someone that the victim didn't know at all. It was a complete, kind of random stranger act. And that's why, this one has kind of become difficult to get any traction on. I think it's very likely that it was somebody that's familiar with our community. It's not a stranger that's just passing through town and decided to do what they did. Because of the randomness and the probability of finding this guy at this address at this time to rob is not something that you would just stumble upon. So I think it's somebody that's familiar with the neighborhood, familiar with the community. They may not have known Charles, but they knew the area, and they were comfortable with committing the act that they were about to commit, which I believe was going to be an aggravated robbery, robbing somebody at gunpoint.
He's just like, who's going to take me to school?
I remember in one of the stories I did with Charles's friends, it was a group of childhood friends who had stayed really close all these years, and I thought that spoke to his character and the kind of person he was. And I remember one of his friends saying that they had talked to one of his sons, and his son said, well, who's going to take me to school now? And it just made me think about all of the little things that, it's not just the big things that he missed. It's those little things too, the worries that come from a child's heart in a tragedy like this, and none of that can be erased. But I just hope, beyond hope, that they'll be able to get some justice.
I think there's enough people who love Charles. Those kids are going to be loved.
If he is 1/10 the man his daddy was, the angels in heaven will be extremely excited.
I think there's a good likelihood that somebody maybe watching this program, will have heard a story or know someone who's talked about or bragged about a connection to this. And so because of that, I think there's a lot of potential for investigative leads, which would then in fact could lead us to the right conclusion of identifying who's responsible.
Now, back in 2019, in an effort to help detectives close cases like this one, Crime Stoppers raised the reward on cold case homicides from up to $2,500 to up to $10,000. The interview you saw from Christina Britt was from that story, and we have a link to that in this web story. But if you have any information on this or any other cold case homicide, call Crime Stoppers at 940-322-9888.